Alright, so um, we're starting off at the bottom of page 399. Am I at page 399? Yeah. I brought drink to Vera Kilia a time or two. I don't think she was eating much and she barely spoke to me. She wasn't living anymore. Not even surviving, just waiting for a death that Tashi Nia was too busy and distracted to schedule. I thought that was cruel of her. The waiting, as I know from my own experience, is the worst part. There was only one more time that Vera Kilia and I had any kind of conversation as significant as the ones we'd had when I was her prisoner. There had been another blizzard and the snow had fallen so thick that everything was muffled and quiet. Alcohol was the only consumable that she would reliably accept. I'm not a soft-hearted sort, as you know, but I have some basic compassion, and I remembered how much being isolated had broken me down. I went to sit in Vera Kiliat's room almost every single day. I did my work in there some days. I took my meals there more than anywhere else. It's just that we didn't talk and she barely ever looked at me. But then that night I was standing at the windowsill, wrapped in a blanket to keep out the chill. I looked out on the snow that covered the whole city and softened all its plains and angles and corners, gleaming blue and white in the moonlight. Pinpricks of warm yellow fire-lit windows here and there. It was another of those crystal clear nights, and being so high up in the bank, I had a clear view over most of the rooftops and across to the southeastern quadrant of the sky, where Hatoun's gate was peeking over the horizon. The whirlpool of milk in the woman's clay pot, as your people called it. Virakilia, what do you call that? I asked her. Sometimes I did that, asked her questions, and most of the time she ignored me. This time, though, she lifted her head off the couch where she was curled up. Call what? Her voice was rough and crackly. She sounded ill. On the horizon, the big bright cloud of stars that looks like a whirlpool. It's just stars, she said. Some people name them. I don't know the names. You have names for the moons? The boat and the runner. Not the worst names, I suppose, not as uncreative as I was expecting. The Zerek called them the white one and the stately one, which is worse, but I cut them some slack because they're not aggressively boring like the Nerevans. That thing is just as significant in the night sky, so as long as it's clear. I guess you must have decided to ignore me. You know, I said quietly so that no one else would hear. The chants don't pass much knowledge of ourselves down. Our histories, certainly, and each apprentice learns a little of their lineage, their master chant and their grandmaster and the great-grandmaster, and so on. We have very, very few rituals. If I have an apprentice when I die, and if I see my death coming, I'll tell them my true name then, the last person in the world to hear it. For the most part, the job is about learning other people, not learning chants. We don't have many traditions. I suppose I was telling her all that because I knew as well as she did that she was going to die soon. I'm only telling you this because I trust you more than almost anyone else in the world, and deservedly so. I might add, not to flatter you over much, but that those stars, that's something we remember. Thousands of years ago, the ancient chants called those stars the Eye of Shugwa. General Grizal would have called it the mirror of heaven, the door to the afterlife. We don't have one, Ayan. One what? An afterlife. I almost started banging my head against the wall. I swear it to you, these damn Nerevans and their complete lack of imagination. If I never set foot in this country again, I'll die happy. So when you die, you just end, I said. I tried to keep my voice even and calm. I was fully aware that afterlives and death must have been on her mind more than usual. And here I thought you were all terrifically superstitious. These Things can happen to you at the moment of death. The black witch can capture your breath, or you can become a black witch yourself. But all those things foreigners have about a beautiful place that's comfortable and soft and where nothing hurts, and everyone lives happily and is reunited with all their other dead loved ones. No, that doesn't happen. When you're dead, you're either gone or you're a bad thing. How do you become a black witch? Nobody knows. It's just a thing that happens sometimes, she said tensely, though. If nothing's done with your body, it makes it more likely. People who get lost in mines or up on mountains or who drown or die of sickness with no one around. She swallowed. Violent deaths, too. Nobody becomes a black witch by dying peacefully of old age in their own bed. What ought to be done? A funeral, prayers, burning the body if you want to be really sure. I went over to her couch and perched on the chair that I'd pulled in front of it days before. I want to talk about something. I want to be forthright. She gazed at me with glassy, dull eyes. You're going to die soon. Yes. Is there anything that I can do for you? No, you can't help me. I can't stop your death from coming to you when it is your time, no, but if you tell me what you like done with your body afterwards, I can try to see that it happens. I can speak for you after your death if you give me the words you want spoken, and I can try to ease your fear and pain until that day comes. Stories aren't going to help anything now, Chant. A long time ago and half the world away, my brain whispered. But it wasn't the time. She didn't want to hear it. This was one time to respect that. Most of the time, people don't know when it's good for them to listen, when they really need to hear something. Most people only want to listen when it's easy and convenient for them. Sometimes it's important to make them listen, to speak even when there's no one willing to hear. But a woman's last days, a person gets a better idea in times like that about what she needs, about what's important. I could provide comfort in the moment if she wanted it, but if she didn't want it, then she wouldn't be around long enough for it to make a difference. So I sat in silence with her and stared towards the window where I could just see a few stars above the rooftops and the edge of one moon. Is there anyone who should hear about your passing? I asked eventually. Anyone who needs to hear will hear. Her Majesty will make it known. I don't think she's got the stomach to parade my head through the city on a pike, but she'll make it known. I think I'll tell a story about you one day, I said half absently. I was only thinking about some of the things she had told me when she was drunk. I was thinking that there might be another Vera Kiliat one day in some other place, in some other city, and if I ever met her, she might need to hear these stories, the same way that this Vera Kiliat had needed to hear about Girsah, the general of jade and iron, and the way that Girsah had probably once heard stories about a brave and honorable woman before her, and perhaps the next one wouldn't be destined to die like this. That's something I never told Vera Kiliat, how Girsah died. It was eerily similar to this, in fact. She fought hard for a faction of the empire to prevail, to preserve the status quo and behave with honor and charity, though she was as hard and unbending as steel. And in the end, she lost, and she was imprisoned by the new empress. Bending as steel. And when she lost, she was imprisoned by the new empress. And then she was quietly killed with all other high-profile supporters of the opposition's faction. She died with honor, and I knew Vera Kiliat would die with honor too. I'll tell someone someday about you. If you must, she said. I won't be around to care. I will, though. I know you never felt much of a need to stick to the truth, so just don't tell them about this. She flopped her hand weakly. Tell them I was brave when I was taken in. Tell them I didn't break. Tell them I didn't waver. There's truth and there's truth, I told her. Some things are true even if they didn't happen that way in real life. She didn't react. That means I'll tell them you were brave. You didn't waver. Good. She turned over away from me and pulled the blanket up under her chin. I left as soon as after that. When it was clear that the conversation was over. That was the last time I ever saw her or spoke to her. She was taken away early the next morning and killed. She was brave. She didn't waver. When I found out, I asked Tashina Tomos to ensure that the proper rites were spoken over Vera Kiliat's body, but she said that they'd already dumped the corpse in the bay. Any words she had said over her had been spoken in passing, casually by whoever dragged the wheelbarrow down to the quay and dumped her into a dinghy to be rowed out to the deep part of the water. I never got a chance to speak words over the bay like I wanted to after I heard, but a few days after that we moved from the bank to the Tower of Pattern. It was more defensible, and the bank had to function as a bank now. And I climbed the endless stairs to the very top of the tower, and I stood on the parapet up to my knees in snow and shivering. There was the slightest sliver of water visible between the buildings, and I didn't even know if that was the bay or the ocean. But I whispered words for her. I whispered peace and freedom from the black witches who would twist her into a monstrous thing, and I said that I would tell stories of her so she would be remembered as she was. And so I have. It was soon after that I decided that it was time again to attempt my escape. I knew that events were by this point well under your control, and so all that was left for me to do was to find a way to get myself and Ilfing out of the city alive. I had to make an appointment to see the queen. She was so busy these days, as it turns out, being the sole ruler of a warring nation. Recovering from the near implosion of its economy takes up a lot of time in one's schedule, so I went to her personal secretary. I found Evil standing in the corridor outside Tashinia's chamber, right at the base of the godforsaken spiral staircase that formed the central spine of the tower. He was speaking to Ilfing in a low voice and stroking Ilfing's arm in a way that people have when they're trying to comfort and dismiss someone at the same time. We can talk later, all right, Evil said. Sure, Ilfing was smiling, but with only about 8/10 of the usual cheer. Yes, that would be nice. I like that, but I'm just busy for the day. I could keep you company, Evil couldn't quite suppress his wince and gods. Even Ilfing couldn't miss that. What was that for? Nothing, Evil said, shaking his head. Honestly, nothing. Her Majesty needs my full attention today, that's all. And I can't waste my time on. That came out wrong. It just meant that I'll be very boring today. Evil doesn't want you, Ilfing. You're never boring, Ilfing said, all sparkling smiles once again. Evil forced a fairly convincing smile and kissed Ilfing's forehead. We can spend time together later, I promise. Sorry to interrupt, I said loudly. I need to talk to Her Majesty today. I'd like an appointment with her if she has any time available. Evil opened the messenger bag hanging at his hip, took out a booklet, and flicked through it. Ilfing slunk away up the stairs while he was occupied. His shoulders were hunched in a way I didn't like. She's only available during lunch. She's having the rest of her household move here to the tower later today. He snapped the book closed. Will that do? I snorted. Of course it would. Lunch will be fine, I said. And I'd like a word now, if you don't mind. I sighed heavily. What else do you want from me? I'm doing all I can. Just be patient. We could be doing more, he hissed. He glanced around and leaning close, his voice low. We could get rid of her now. Why wait? I glared hard at him. My guard was about 20 feet back down the corridor, and even if she was occupied with cleaning her fingernails, Evil had no call to be acting so obviously suspicious. Well, I said, passing on my sunniest smile, that sounds like a fine notion. I'll leave all that to you, since it was your idea. He stilled and got pale. I snorted and went after Ilfing, stealing my soul and my knees as I always did when I had to go up those damn stairs. I caught up with him after a floor or two, and I took him by the arm and turned him. Oh, Chan, he said, wiping his face and pretending like he hadn't. Hi, so what was that all about? What? Just now between the two of you. What's Evil's problem? Problem? Nothing. Tell a better story if you're going to lie. He cringed. He's busy. What is it really? Ilfing couldn't meet my eyes. He reached down and picked at the edge of stone in the wall. I'm not used to people who won't tell me what they really think of me. That's because everyone likes you, I said, which is obnoxiously true. Everyone has always liked you. Yeah, he said in a small voice. Do you think being liked is a skill? The Refni and their attention to skills, I tell you. My first instinct was to say, well, yeah, obviously. I thought about it then, thought about it hard. Ilfing deserved a careful answer in this moment. No, I said slowly. I don't think it is, because being liked is more about other people than it is about you. Liking people is a skill, though, one that you're very good at. Being liked, no. Why? Are you worried Evil doesn't like you? I don't know, Ilfing whispered. He liked me before. He liked me a lot before. Now I don't know. Well, that's his business, I said brusquely. Comforting people now, there's a skill. I'm terrible at it. You can't control him or what he thinks or what choices he makes, so tell him to go fuck himself. It's not his fault he's busy. It is his fault if he thinks you're a waste of time, I said, and Ilfing flinched again. That's what he was about to say. He has things to do, and I don't, not really. I've been talking to all the thieves in Constanza's family, trying to get them to tell me stories. It's chant practice, essentially. Whenever we stop somewhere, he goes and makes friends and looks and listens and gathers all the raw material he can find, and then we talk about it, sometimes every day, sometimes once or twice a week, depending on how fruitful his scavenging has been. He tells me all the stories and rumors and gossip he's heard, and together we separate the wheat from the chaff, and I ask him questions until I feel like he's been made to think about things sufficiently. But I think they're tired of me too. They keep saying they're not in the mood or that they don't have anything else to tell, so I'm bored a little bit, and I want to spend time with Evil, and he... Ilfing shrugged, still picking at the wall. I'm always around when he wants to be with me. But the reverse is not always true. He nodded and swallowed hard. So does that say something about him or about you? Ilfing chanced an uncertain look at me out of the corner of his eye. Him? I shrugged. Figure it out yourself. Now, unfortunately for Evil, I have assignments for you for the rest of the day and probably most of the evening. So he won't be available at all. I've waited and watched to see if he'd protest. If he did, I would have dropped the issue immediately. It's not like I was about to keep him from Evil against his will. He sniffled and wiped his face and nodded. All right, he said, and managed a wan whisper of a smile. I took him to my meeting with Tashinia. He stood quietly at the door and said nothing. And while Tashinia prodded unenthusiastically at a dish of baked fish with lemon, I offered my life in exchange for my freedom. I've had a dream, I told her, and the gods have offered me a choice, and so I offer you a choice. Will you hear me? When are you going to tell me another prophecy? She demanded, if she hadn't heard. The raiders are laying waste to the western marches. I need information. They're coming east. My dream concerned my prophecies, Your Majesty. Dream? What about a dream? In the dream, I stood on the edge of a great cliff, looking down into an abyss. At the bottom, a storm was raging. Behind me, a desert. Above me, the sky was black and the sun burned cold. I heard a voice from out of the abyss, and it said that there were only two paths in my life. I could accept the gift of the gods one last time and do some good in the world. I could turn back into the barren wasteland from which I could never return. Tashinia almost furrowed her brows at me. You just get to pick? Yes, but it comes with a price. If I choose to take the gift, it will destroy me. It will leave me shattered. This is what the dream told me. She narrowed her eyes at me. You don't want to do it then? I want to offer you a choice so that I can make my own. I want my freedom, my liberty. I'm a very old man, and I want to live out what little life is left to somewhere safe and quiet. I want to return to my homeland. If you allow me to leave, I will give myself to the gods for you one last time. The semi-sacrifice would change the world, but I believe that the price is that it will burn everything out of me, my mind, my wits. I'll be nothing but a doddering, drooling husk. I might not even be aware of myself or my surroundings after that, but I want to know that I'll be taken care of, that I'll be living where no one will trouble me. I nodded towards Ilfing. My apprentice knows, and he's a good lad. He will stay with me until the end. I don't imagine that I will last very long in that state afterwards. I might not even make it home. So all you want from me is your freedom and passage to the border, perhaps a few coins for Ilfing to help us get the rest of the way if your majesty feels inclined to generosity. In exchange, I get, as I said, a great prophecy, one that will change the world, one that will shake the foundations of destiny, one that will empower you to carve whatever you wish into the tablets of fate with the chisel you've picked up. She sat back and tapped her fingers against the arm of a chair. She had done away with many of the jewels that she had been wearing during her stay in the bank. She now wore only a diamond pendant around her neck, a few simple rings. Her clothes were still finely cut and finely woven, with a secret, subtle glimmering in the extravagant folds and masses of cloth. My eyes had become accustomed to beautiful things, as one's eyes do bright light when one first wakes in the morning, and it was no longer searingly painful to look upon her. I thought she might be getting a few tiny traces of wrinkles across her forehead and around her mouth, but perhaps that was simply wishful thinking. Do you need time to think about it? I asked her. No, of course not. Why would I? You will accept the gift. That is not a question. You will give me everything I need to know. And after that, if you are correct about what will happen to you, you'll be used up. Useless, as you say, a doddering husk. Why would I care where you and your apprentice go after that? I nodded. I would rather live as an imbecile in freedom than live another day in possession of my wits, yet in bondage. She shrugged. When will you tell me this great prophecy? So she said, I nodded. I would rather live as an imbecile in freedom than live another day in possession of my wits, yet in bondage. She shrugged. When will you tell me this great prophecy? It will likely come to me during the night while I sleep. The gods prefer to speak in dreams. They are easier to move than creatures or signs in the real world. Will you stand vigil to witness it, or will you trust my apprentice to transcribe it accurately for you? Of course I'll stand witness, she snapped. There was a light in her eyes. The dreams of power were reawakening in her, and it was dawning on her that this was what she had been waiting for truly. That was scary, Ilfing whispered to me in the hallway afterwards. It sounded real. I stopped, I looked at him, and then I said, lad, it was real. He frowned. But you say you didn't have any magic. You said none of the Cascanian have it, and that's not in your blood. Some people say that it's not about your blood, lad. There's stories here and there. People move somewhere else and live there for a long time, and sometimes they get the magic of that place. Look at Constanza. Can you imagine her having Arjuni magic? No, he said slowly. No, I agreed. The land sinks into your bones, and she lived in this land all her life. If she had any magic, it'd be the Nuri even kind. And you, he was confused, poor lad, bewildered more than broken-hearted, but I knew that'd come too. I resigned myself to it. Who knows? I've been so many places. Who knows where my dream came from? It really happened. Yes, I said. He was confused, deeply so. You're going to die, he whispered. Something like it. He began to cry. I steeled my heart and held firm. He's not a good liar yet. I can't tell him the truth. You'll stay with me, won't you? I said. You won't leave me to rot. He cried harder, big hitching sobs, and shook his head. Of course I won't. Of course not. I patted his arm. Do me a favor, lad. I don't imagine I'll care much where we go afterwards. I'll leave it up to you. You'll know what's best. But do me a favor and take me out of this city. Anywhere but Vasilla, all right? Maybe you can convince Evil to leave too, and the two of you can set up and make home together, eh? Just not in Vasilla. All I needed was for him to take me out of the city. I could handle the rest if he just got me out. Oh, shoot. Okay. Tashin, I feel like my nose is very stuffy. Maybe where the glasses like sit, but my nose is very stuffy. And my lips are very dry. Do I have the, I took it out. Took out my, I had some Vaseline in here. Feels a little more open without the glasses though. I feel like the glasses pinch my nose. It's already hard to see. It's already hard to Breathe. No air could fit through there. Look at. Only a little bit through here. Tashinia wouldn't allow anyone but Ilfing in with us. She set me up in her own rooms that night, in fact, up high in the tower of Pattern. Gave me a pile of cushions and blankets on the floor of her sitting room, which was fine with me, more comfortable than the cot I'd been sleeping on. Relegated to my former cell once again, though this time I was allowed to wander. It was an unsettling place to be, even so. I made my skin crawl, and I kept seeing ghosts around every corner, or weavers or black witches. As far as Ilfing knew, I was really giving up everything for our freedom. He spent most of that day begging me not to do it, swearing that we could find another way, but I was resolute. He cried for a few hours, and when we went down into Tashinia's chambers that evening, his eyes were still red and swollen. He kept saying that he just didn't understand how it could happen, and I kept shrugging and saying, "No one understands magic, lad, not really." Again and again, even more desperate, he asked if I was sure about this. Again and again, I told him what I told Tashinia. I'd rather be witless and free. He fussed over me as we settled down. I too sleep, and he and Tashinia Tarmos to sit vigil. Tried to tuck me in as if I was a child until I snapped at him and batted his hands away, but I saw his eyes fill with tears again. I knew this was all a scam and that no one was saying goodbye to anyone tonight, but Ilfing, poor lad, thought that this was the last time that they were going to speak to each other before my soul burned out of me, that we were ever going to speak to each other. Now I don't know if you've ever had to stay awake for hours while pretending to be asleep, but it's tricky. I couldn't sneak coffee beforehand because then I would have been jittery and twitchy the whole time. It would have spoiled the, dramatic tension I made do with flexing my hands and feet under the blankets when I thought Ilfing and Tashinia Tarmos weren't looking, and I pinched my arms hard when I really started to drift off. "This is taking too long," Tashinia Tarmos grumbled after a while. "He's giving up everything for you," Ilfing replied more bitterly than I thought wise. "The least he can do is show some patience, some fucking patience." That's what it sounded like he wanted to say. "A man is making a sacrifice tonight, a great man, a great sacrifice. Be respectful." I have expected Tashinia Tarmos to throw him out of the room or call off our deal entirely, but I think she must have been too surprised to realize she could. She wasn't a woman who had to face down adolescent impertinence in her everyday life. My foot cramped, I gritted my teeth through it and supposed that this, at least, would keep me awake. I waited and I waited and I waited, and Ilfing and Tashinia Tarmos said nothing more to each other. So then I started screaming. They jumped about a mile in the air, both of them, and Ilfing was at my side immediately. I flailed and struggled in the covers, tore at my hair, screaming all the while, pissed myself too, because why the hell not? No one would do that if you were faking it. At least no one would accuse someone of faking it if you did. You either got to be dead fucking serious about your ruse to do something disgusting like that, or it's got to be real. I babbled in a language neither Ilfing nor Tashinia knew, some obscure tribal dialect of Perlan. Sounds hellish the first time you come across it. All guttural little throat-scraping consonants. In fact, it's a really beautiful language in its content, with some very elegant and subtle ways of expressing emotional nuance. But when you don't know what it means, gods, you think that the speaker had just sucked off an entire pack of demons not an hour previously. So I recited delicate springtime love poetry at them in this Arakak Valley dialect of Perlish for a few minutes until Ilfing was near crying and Tashinia Tarmos were frozen by the wall next to the door. Don't know what she thought I would do, but I could see that she regretted not letting any of the guards in to stand by. I wheezed in a huge gasp of air and arched my back, and I let my eyes roll up in my head. 5 battles until glory. Tova and Vicino you will lose. Do not try to win them. Send your men and women and let them die. Kasardan to Cheryl you will win as if you willed a sword from the hand of a mighty god, but let Tova and Vicino be lost, and take your troops to Atacosa plain near Biordor, and have them wait in the ravine there. The enemy will break upon your shields like water upon the rocks. Glory, 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 long live the queen. And then I fell silent. Ilfing's sobs was the only sound in the room. He gathered my head to his chest and cradled me. There he sobbed. His tears were falling hot on my face, but I was feigning unconsciousness and couldn't wipe them away. There, are you happy? It's done. You know how to win now. Are you free? You're free, Tashinia Tarmos says. Your debts are all paid. I almost swore then. Debts? I had all but forgotten that I had promised Constanza months ago that I would owe her a favor. Now, you well know that I never got along with her and probably never would have, even given 100 years to try, but damn it, a chant has got to have some honor. I promised her a favor in return for the ink and paper she brought me once, and that had to be repaid before I stepped foot out of this godforsaken country. So I stirred a little bit and whispered. Ilfin gasped and stroked the hair out of my face, wiped his eyes off my skin. Chant, are you all right? Can you speak? The woman, I rasped, the woman of dark robes and dark skin, she must be sent away. What, Ilfin said? Constanza? She will secure your glory, O queen. I was just profaning. You may win the battles, but ensure your realm's prosperity. Another feeble, whistling, shuddering breath. Send her to the south. Send her to carry your word. She is destined to serve you, O queen. What is he saying? Tasha Tom was demanding. Ambassador, I said, to the land of endless forests. Eshery, you have to send Cassandra to Eshery as a Nuri even ambassador, Ilfin said, voice shaking, to secure the prosperity of your realm. Lose 2 battles, hide my army in a ravine, and send that woman away as an ambassador, and this will be key to winning. That's what he said. Ilfin sniffled and started pulling the befouled blankets off me. Strong boy, he didn't even flinch or gag in the slightest. No sign whatsoever of distaste, just swift, business-like movements. Tasha Tarmos, on the other hand, clapped her hand over her mouth and almost threw up. Disgusting. Like I'm going to let him lie in his own filth, Ilfin snapped. His heart may be beating still, his lungs may be working, but he's dead because of you. Hush, Ilfin, I thought, hush, not the time, but then, when I have ever taken the time to curb myself from running my mouth. Nothing bad had ever come to me. I lived this many decades, and I probably have at least a couple left in me. It's a system that hasn't done me too much harm. I mean, they only nearly executed me for witchcraft, espionage, and brazen impertinence. I would not be roused, or so they thought, so Ilfin stripped me bare, and Tasha Tarmos threw some towels at him. Carefully not looking the least, she choked again. Ilfin wrapped me up tenderly and called for some of the servants to help carry me up to the cell, so Tashania's floor could be scrubbed and she could have her room back. I think she must have left. I don't think she could stomach setting foot in that room again. Ilfin had a brazier brought to my cell, and it was piled high with sticks, twigs, until the room was toasty warm, and he bathed me carefully. He truly is a jewel amongst apprentices. My heart was moved, I tell you. I knew he was going to be angry at me later, but what could I do? He's not a good actor. He's far too honest. He would have given the whole game up. He wouldn't have cried over me if he'd known. He kept crying, actually, as he wiped me down with warm water and dressed me in a new long tunic and small clothes. I guess it's good practice, I have practice, he murmured to me at one point, and I nearly jumped out of my skin, thought he'd seen through my act, but no. It was something else. When I was very young, my grandmother, well, she lost her wits too after she took sick one summer, couldn't move or feed herself, couldn't clean herself, couldn't speak, and her face went droopy on one side. We all took turns with her. I hated it then, hated it, not because it was disgusting, but because she had been so wonderful before she went sick. She used to be soft and clean smelling like hay and meadow flowers in the springtime, and her hands were always warm even in winter. I used to go play out in the cold and the snow, and then I'd run into her house and she'd lay her hands on my cheeks when they were wind chapped. And it was just like the sunshine on my face. I hated it because I lost her even though she was sitting right there. I hate this too, he whispered. The same tone of guilt and abnegation as when he'd confessed about being homesick. I know it's stupid, but I hope you get better, and also hope that if you don't get better, you'll die quickly. I wish you told me more about what to do. Tell me what to do. How to be a chant. I wish you told me whether, he sniffled, whether you want to suffer or not, trapped in your mind. He tried looking into my eyes then. It was rather difficult to make them go and focus, so I added some drool. Poor boy, I put him through a lot. Only a few days I thought at him. Only until we crossed the border as we are safely away. He bundled me into my cot and sat on the floor next to it, stroking my hair and leaning his head on the mattress next to me. He sang a few Harefni songs, lullabies they must have been, and he told me a sweet, familiar story that I heard 100 times before. The 15th tale, how the Jarl Smoot came to be. You know, a long time ago, when there were still stone men living up the mountains, there was a fox spirit who got into all sorts of mischief. He was little all over, with little hands on his little face and little feet, and he lived in a little burrow on the side of the mountain with the view of the land tumbling down to the fjord and the big sea. He was so high up he could see almost all the way to the ice fields in the north, where it's so cold that the snow never melts. The little fox spirit was out gathering berries one day when a stoneman came stomping down the mountain. Thump, 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 crash. Went his right foot straight through the berry bushes, and smash went his left foot, straight through the roof of the fox spirit's burrow, and crash went his right foot again, and so on. The fox spirit cried out in dismay, but he was so little, and the stoneman was so big that his voice was quite lost in all the crashing and smashing. The fox spirit picked through the ruins of his little house. It was quite a mess. The only thing he could rescue from the rubble was his little belt pouch, where he kept spare scraps of frog. He stomped his little foot and he crossed his little arms and he pouted his little mouth. "That stone man," he said. "Someone should teach him to look where he's going." The little fox spirit sat down on the ruins of his house and had a good cry, and then he dried his face and he tied his belt pouch around his little waist, and he went flying off to find someone who could help him. But the stone men were bigger than anything else on the mountain and stronger too, and none of the other spirits would help him, and none of the animals either. Finally, the fox spirit had asked everyone on the mountain for help, and he gone down into the green valley and asked there too, and then out to the rocky shore. Not even the scuttling crabs wanted anything to do with the stone men. So the fox spirit sat on a pebble by the water and had another good cry until one of the sea women heard him and came to see what was the matter. She was terribly beautiful with long, wet, twisty green curls woven with seaweed and shells, and she was chubby all over like a seal, the better to keep the cold out when she swam in the dark, cold parts of the sea. She had big, big eyes like a seal too, and a seal's tail instead of legs, and the sea woman looked like this, you know. The fox spirit thought she had a very kindly face, and so he told her all his troubles from the beginning to end. "Well," said the sea woman, "I've never seen one of those stonemen before, but I can't say I think much of them if they're all like that. What are you going to do about it?" "I don't know," said the fox spirit. "No one will help me, and all I have to my name is a purse of scraps." "Well," said the sea woman, "you could go build another home." "Only to have it crushed by stonemen?" cried the fox spirit. "Well," said the sea woman, "you could go somewhere they don't go." "There is nowhere," cried the fox spirit. "Well," said the sea woman, "get a little testy. You could go talk to the stonemen and ask them nicely to leave your house alone." "Do you think that would work?" asked the fox spirit. "I don't see why not," said the woman, and slipped beneath the waves. Remember, though, the sea woman had never seen a stone man, and she don't know anything about them. The fox spirit wandered up the mountain to where his house had been, and he followed the stoneman's footprints for miles and miles until he came to the stoneman's big, big house. The fox spirit crawled through the crack under the door and found himself in a big, big room with a big, big fire and a big, big hearth and a big, big stone woman sitting at a big, big table. "Excuse me," said the fox spirit. "I'm sorry for barging in like this, but well, I suppose it's fair considering what happened to my house." But he was so little and the stone man was so big that she didn't hear him. She was sucking the roast marrow out of some bones. So the fox spirit took out the scraps of frog from his pouch and braided them together into his little sail, and he held it above his head and blew into it, and whoosh, off he went, just like a puff from a dandelion. He floated up on the table by the stone woman's plate, and he jumped up and down, shouted to get her attention until she noticed. "What on earth are you?" she said, much surprised. "I am the fox spirit," said the fox spirit, "and your husband, whoever stomped my little house flat." "I see," she says. "So what are you here for? Aren't you be building another house?" "Not if he's going to come along and stomp it flat again. People should watch where they're going. He could have killed me, squished me flat, just like my little house. He only walks on the land we own," she said, cracking another bone and sucking the marrows. "So it's your own fault, really, for trespassing." "Fine," said the fox spirit, crossing his little arms. "Where does your land end?" "We own all the mountain and all the valley and the rocky shore and the mountain across the water and the mountain on the other side of the valley, a very modest homestead." "Modest," said the fox spirit. "That's practically the entire world." "Really, you should have been paying us rent if you've been living on our land all these years," said the stone woman. But then she looked the fox spirit up and down and laughed. "I suppose for a homestead your size, you'd pay us a single grain of wheat once a year, and we consider that great wealth." The fox spirit was hopping mad by now. He didn't like being laughed at, and he wasn't unusually little. It was a stone woman who was unusually big, so he said, "I will buy it from you, my little plot of land, and I will pile up stones all around the border, and all your husband or whoever to do is to step over the little plot." "And how little is this plot?" She spread out her napkin on the table and gestured to it. "How many napkins, little fox spirit?" He paced around the cloth and measured it out with his footsteps, and finally looked up and said, "4 of these." The stone woman laughed and laughed, loud enough that the fox spirit had to clap his hands over his little ears, loud enough that the rafters shook and dust came trickling down. "What madness, expecting my husband to go out of his way to avoid a scrap of land. That's more madness. What could you possibly give us that would be worth the inconvenience?" "I'll find something," said the little fox spirit. "I haven't anywhere else to go." "You have nothing we would want," said the stone woman. "Fine," shouted the little spirit. "Then I'll win it from you." "Will you now?" said the stone woman. "And what kind of contest?" "Whatever you like, whatever your husband likes," says the little fox spirit, stopping his little foot. "Name anything." The stone woman rolled her eyes. "If you insist," she said. "But what if you lose?" "I won't," said the fox spirit. "But if I do?" "If I do, then I'll just have to build my house somewhere else, maybe in a briar thicket." "You have to pay us rent if you live on our land," said the stone woman. "You haven't anything of value anyway." "I have a pearl," said the fox spirit. "A pearl from a sea woman. It's as big as my head, and it's kept in a very safe, secret place. I use it as a looking glass. So fine. If I lose, you can have it." "I have pearls aplenty," said the stone woman, yawning. "But this one is magical," said the fox spirit. "Let it be 3 matches. If your husband wins, he can have my pearl as a first rent payment." I'll discuss it with him, said the stone woman. Come back in a few days. I need some water. I'm on the page of top 423. So the fox spirit is a big stone woman. The stone man, they own all the land. So the fox spirit, pretty hungry now. I gotta keep going. Now, what the fox spirit didn't know was that the stone woman was terribly interested in the so-called magical pearl from the sea woman. They owned the mountain across the fjord, but they had a terrible rough time getting to it because the sea people's enchantments will call up a storm whenever the stonemen set foot into this boat. The stone woman suspected that the sea woman's enchanted pearl would be able to tame the waves, you see. But of course the fox spirit didn't have such a pearl, so he went down to the edge of the water again and he cried until the sea woman came back to see what was the matter with him, and he told her all his troubles. She was quite surprised that he'd taken her advice after all and had gone to see the stoneman, and she laughed in his face when he told her about how he blurted out that lie about the pearl. Foolish little spirit, you can't enchant pearls, everyone knows this. Then whatever will I do, the fox spirit wailed. I shall have to live in a briar thicket, and they may squish me flat when they find out I don't have the pearl for them. Only if you lose, said the sea woman, but look, I'll do something for you if you go away from the shore and stop weeping and carrying on so. And she poked through the pebbles on the rocky beach until she found one that was just about the size of the fox spirit's head, and she rubbed it between the palms of her hands until it was quite shiny and nearly round. Then she kissed it and winked at it, and she rubbed a little earwax onto it, and then she washed it clean again. There, she said, and gave it to the fox spirit. Put that out into the moonlight for a couple nights, and that should be enough of a magical pearl to please anyone. The fox spirit thanked her sweetly and carried the pebble back to a little hollow between the roots of a great oak tree, and he used some leaves to build a little tent for himself, and he put the pebble just outside where the moonlight was sure to fall on it. The next day the pebble seemed to have gone a little lighter, and it gleamed a little if you squinted at it, and the day after that the pebble was as white as milk, so white that when the sun shone on it, the whiteness hurt to look at it. Then the day after that, the pebble was a beautiful silvery color, and it glowed faintly, just like the moon's. The fox spirit covered it up with leaves and hid it under the root of the oak tree, just in case. Then he went to meet with Stoneman and his wife. We will have a contest, said the Stoneman to the fox spirit, and it will be in 3 parts. Yes, said the fox spirit. Running, said the stone woman. Whoever can get from the top of the mountains to the water quicker. I see, said the fox spirit. And weaving? Whoever can weave the finer cloth in a day. Naturally, said the stone woman. And for the 3rd, we will have our judge decide, so it's impartial. The stone man liked to fancy himself a very fair-minded sort of person. Nothing to it, said the fox spirit. Shall we start tomorrow? If you like, said the stone man. Goodbye. The fox spirit left in a tizzy, but he was so shaken up and nervous that he stopped outside of the door of their house and rested against the wall. His little heart was going so fast. That was when he heard what the stone man was saying to his wife. Once we have the pearl, we can comb the waters whenever we like and row across the fjord. I'd rather think we could put in some nets and scoop out all the sea folk if we own the land on either side. That fjord is naturally ours as well, and the sea people aren't paying rent. A wise insight, my husband, said the stone woman. I don't like the idea of those layabouts in our waters eating our fish. Just so, said the stone man. Well, the fox spirit knew something about what it is like to have one's home wrenched away, so he flew down to the water and shouted for the sea woman and heaped pebbles into the water until she came and asked him what was wrong now. And he told her all he had heard, and she got very solemn and nodded. Well, if you say so, then I believe you. I wouldn't like to be made to leave. Well, I suppose I'll have to help you after all then. You needn't, said the fox spirit, but you helped me with the pearl, so I wanted to help you in return, somehow by warning you. You can help us best by winning your contest, said the sea woman. That pearl isn't magical at all, but it won't stop these people once they've gotten an idea like that in their heads. What will you do about running? Lose, cried the fox spirit. How can I win when his legs are so much longer than mine? Well, can you be sure of winning the other 2? The fox spirit thought and thought about this. He was a good weaver, but perhaps the stone man was better. And who knows what the 3rd contest would be. The sea woman sank down into the water until one of her eyes and forehead were about the surface, and she waited. I don't know, said the fox spirit. She bobbed back up to speak. Here's what you should do then. Suggest a fishing contest. The stone man loves to fish, but we will drive all the fish to your nets and you will win. As for the weaving, surely you must weave beautifully. I have seen the fogs you laid out over the bay in autumn. Perhaps, said the fox spirit. Then all is not yet lost, and while if you lose, there are other fjords and other mountains. And other stone men who own the other mountains, grumbled the fox spirit. Perhaps, said the sea woman, and vanished with a splash. The next day the fox spirit stuffed the pearl into his pouch with all the little scraps of fog he'd been able to find. He went to meet with the stone man. A stoneman brought them to a very old tree and said that the tree was being the judge of their contest. Said the tree. I won't have it be said that I didn't choose a fair judge, said the stoneman. Very proud. I chose fairly, you see, because I'm not at all afraid of you. Yes, I see, said the fox spirit. First, show me the pearl so I can be sure that you are playing fairly too. The fox spirit lifted the flap of his little bag and showed the pearl, and the stoneman nodded. Will we go to the top of the mountain and run down the tree? He agreed. I suppose, said the fox spirit. The stoneman laughed and sprinted away up the mountain, and the fox spirit took his little scraps of fog and blew into them again, so he flew, whoosh. But after the snowman, just like a dandelion puff. Up after the snowman, just like a dandelion puff. The snowman had been waiting for a long while by the time the fox spirit made it to the peak. Are you ready? He said. I suppose, said the fox spirit. The snowman dashed away down the mountain, and the fox spirit followed, trying not to cry. By the time he made it back down to the tree, the snowman was agog. You're so slow. It took you ages. I didn't need to rush, said the fox spirit, hiding a sniffle. Very wise, said the tree. Rushing grows weak roots. The next contest, said the stoneman. First, said the tree, a rest. The sun is pleasant today, and the shade is cool, and the fox spirit hasn't caught his breath yet. The stoneman grumbled, but he sat in the shade by the tree roots and uncorked a bottle of something. Said the tree. What's that? It smells wonderful. Mead, said the stoneman. Would you like some? The tree agreed. The stoneman poured a little out of the little tree's roots. Don't be impolite, said the tree. Why don't you offer some to the fox spirit? Ah, yes, of course, the stoneman stammered, a little taken aback. I'll give him a whole bottle if he wants. My best vintage, too. The fox spirit blushed and fidgeted his hands and shook his head. A mere thimble would suffice, he said after he'd taken a few moments to collect himself. It seems right we should all have a drink. Yes, of course, said the stoneman, who was not collected at all. He took a hearty swig from the bottle and splashed a little more on the roots of the tree, and then looked down at the fox spirit and frowned. The fox spirit whisked out his little pouch and weaved a scrap of fog into a cup, and the stoneman carefully trickled meat into it. A fine vintage indeed, said the fox spirit. Come, let's drink again, and they did. A very fine vintage, said the tree. Perhaps just one more round, and so it was. The fox spirit and the stoneman were both a little wobbly by the time the tree said, the next challenge you must weave. Whoever's cloth is the finest shall be the winner. Well, the fox spirit had been planning on weaving a cloth of fox scraps, but then he settled down at his loom and found that this little pouch of scraps was entirely empty. He cried out in horror and dismay, but neither the tree nor the stoneman could hear him over the sound of the stoneman's shuttle already clicking back and forth, and the beater thumping down, and the heddles rattling as they rose and fell. The fox spirit cast about frantically and cursed his senses for being so drowsy and slow with the mead. His eyes landed on the bottle. With a huge effort, he tipped it over, and it sloshed into a deep gold puddle by his little loom. He pulled the heady vapors into a long strand, and he made it into something much like fog. Though it was slicker and silkier in the color of sunlight glistening in stagnant brown forest ponds, and it began to weave it into cloth. The mead fog was slippery and difficult to work, and it twisted and squirmed, nothing like the friendly, downy softness of his usual fog. When the tree called time, the fox spirit removed his cloth from his loom, and a length of shimmering pale gold that ran through his hands like water when it touched it, but floated in the air when he let it billow. The stoneman had woven a piece of linen fine, though it was sheer enough for a bride's wedding sleeves and soft enough to swallow a baby. It was an excellent piece of cloth, but when the fox spirit unrolled his mead fog cloth under the roots of the tree, they all fell silent, until the only sound was the chirping of the birds in the tree branches. Said the tree, marveling. As uncontested as your victory in the race, Stoneman, the weaving contest is an uncontested victory for the fox spirit. Yes, said the Stoneman, staring wide-eyed at the meat cloth. What will our third contest be? Perhaps fishing, squeaked the fox spirit. Said the tree. I will decide. Tomorrow morning we mustn't rush this kind of decision. The next morning the tree said, I've been thinking about the contest. I have pondered that fishing is not very fair. The fox spirit is very small, no bigger than a fish himself, and the stoneman is very large, as large as I am. It's not a fair contest. I have decided we will do something else. The fox spirit was very alarmed, and he thought of the sea woman, but then he saw that the stoneman was also alarmed, and that helped a little. I will ask you riddles, said the tree. The stoneman and the fox spirit both fidgeted, for neither of them was particularly good at riddling. The tree said, a veil in the morning, it creeps along at gloaming. Usually, Ilfing said, dropping his storyteller voice, when you're telling the story to children, you pause here and let them try to guess the answer, and whatever they say, you reply, which is what the stone man said or just what the fox spirit guessed. And if it's right, you continue on. And if it's wrong, you say that the tree said no. And you let them keep guessing until they get it right. And you give them hints that they can think of it. And you keep track secretly of how many riddles you have awarded to each character. Because, of course, the fox spirit has to win in the end. But, well, I just have to tell you the answers. The fox, said the fox spirit. Yes. Next. Turns a sword, turns a spear, does not see, cannot hear. Falls unarmed, lands unbroken, holds his secrets all unspoken. Stone, said the stone man. Yes, next. A dozen arms, 100 hands, 1,000 fingers, hidden feet. The two were silent for a long time until the fox spirit tentatively offered tree. Runs fast forever until it lies still. One mouthful could save, one mouthful could kill. Water, said the stone man. A magic bowl of many colors, dry and wet by turns. Runs fast and forever until it one mouthful could save, one mouthful could kill. Runs fast forever until it lies still. Water, said the stone man. A magic bowl of many colors, dry and wet by turns. Sky, said the fox spirit. Fair lady of flowers, stepping fresh from the thaw, pointed ahead and gasped when she saw the end, my end, but she could not retreat. Why must you end me each time that we meet? Summer, said the stone man. Fair lady of flowers, stepping fresh from the thaw, pointed ahead and gasped when she saw the end, my end, but she could not retreat. Why must you end me each time that we meet? Summer, said stone man. Ancient man, white-haired, garbed in green, silent, the ocean laps at their feet. Mountain, said the fox spirit. The beast untamed ravages village and wilderness. The beast untamed ravages village and wilderness. At home it curls tame in its bed, but it eats from your hand. It feds off the wolves of the winter. Fire, said the stone man. The beast untamed ravages villages and wilderness. At home it curls tame in its bed. Curls tame in its bed. It eats from your hand. Fends off the wolves of the winter. Fire. A box, a cave, a house, a field. The cool smell of dirt that's freshly been tilled. Hands, voice, smells, and heart. Without these it dies, but remains when we part. Home, said the fox spirit. Of course you can go on as long as you like, Goldfing said, or cut it shorter if the children get bored, or if they're small, and it doesn't have to be these riddles, and any will do. Said the tree. It seems the fox spirit has won. The stone man harumphed, but it was beneath his dignity to be a poor loser, and the fox spirit has shown himself the finer riddle guesser. I will grant you your homestead, he said. And no rent, cried the fox spirit. The tree must be witness. The stone man grumbled again. No rent for this year, he said, and next year we will compete again. Every year, said the tree. Surely you can afford to be kinder than that. The fox spirit is quite busy with his work, and you have your own business to attend. Let it be every other year. And so they agreed, and every other year the fox spirit and the stone man met by the tree and exchanged gifts and measured their skills against each other. In some years the fox spirit lost, but the stone man with his big stone brain had very little time to bother with small things, and he never remembered to collect his rent. Over time, other stone men and other spirits joined in. When humans came to that place, the stone men left for the far northern ice fields. But those humans were the Hrefni, and they maintained the contest every other year to honor the spirits of the land. In time, the contest became the manner of choosing the leader of all the villages, the Jarl. And that is how the Jarl Smoot came to be. I just lay there as he talked, obviously, and didn't say anything. It was fine. I was fine. Almost close to an hour. So, I'm not really quite sure. Elfin cared for me constantly for the next few days while he and Constanza's family packed and prepared to set out. He fed me soup and gruel and soft-boiled eggs with new bread smeared with butter. I stayed as catatonic as I could. The damn child was with me almost every moment of the day, and he simply would not leave me be. I've been thinking that I would be left to my own devices in isolation as I had been for months, but no, apparently when you're a severe invalid, you get company for every waking moment. He brought visitors to me from time to time and talked like he could fill up my silence with words and bring me back to myself. Nine Fingers deigned to play cards with him a few times, and he yammered on at great length about the games he used to play as a child in her arsenal. Tashinia Tarmos did not visit. He brought Constanza to see me. That was the worst. The two of them sat there gossiping as they must have done when they were alone by themselves before everything happened, except that Constanza kept shooting me these looks out of the corner of her eye. Does he know where he is, she asked. Does he know who he is? Ilfing's aggressively chipper mask slipped a little, and I caught a glimpse of haunting sorrow before he yanked the wall back up. I don't know, he said airily. Chant, Constanza said, leaning forward and resting her elbows on her knees. You and their grandfather. Nothing, obviously. She had a very strange look on her face as she straightened her back and rummaged through her pockets a new pipe I saw in a new tobacco pouch. What I assumed was new tobacco, too. I thought her hands might be trembling a little as she packed in leaf and lit it. That's disturbing, she said, quiet and intense. The way his eyes are so dead, the way he looks at you, but he's not looking at you. She shivered and cradled the pipe close to her mouth with both hands as if she was shielding herself. Is it going to get any better? Ilfing's mask flagged again. Briefly, I don't know. Where are you going to take him? Another flicker, this one longer. I don't know, but you're leaving with us, aren't you? He nodded, sniffled. Ilfing. And I had to watch as he buried his face in his hands and wept. Constanza got up, set her pipe on her chair, and wrapped her arms around him. She had proper robes again with sleeves so voluminous they engulfed Ilfing like wings. He put his head on her shoulder and sobbed, and she hushed him and stroked his hair and rocked him a little back and forth. Sweet boy, she called him. You're so young for this. It all happened so fast, Ilfing gasped between racking sobs. He was fine one day, and then I had to watch him choose to die. I had to watch him burn himself out just so that we'd be able to leave, and now I have to stay with him. She tucked his head under her chin and tied her arms around him. Sweet boy, he's family, isn't he? Ilfing nodded, sniffled wetly. You have to take care of yourself too, sweet boy. Remember that, all right? It's okay to get out for a while and have time for yourself. It doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a good person, actually, because then you won't run out of energy. You'll be able to continue taking good care of him, right? Ilfing golfed a few breaths, nodded again. Now, I hear I'm being appointed to Nuri-Even ambassador to Esherie, which isn't really what I planned for my life. Some glamour, I suppose, but too much actual work. You're going to be really good at it, Ilfing said, as if his heart was breaking. It's an appointment from the gods, and you're going to be amazing at it. I'm going to miss you so much. Well, that's the thing, she said. I'm taking my whole household with me to Esherie, and if you're going to be traveling a ways with us anyway, I was going to ask if you'd like to stay on as my assistant. What? I thought, and had to stomp down any visible reaction on my face. That presumptuous bitch. I always knew she was going to try to steal him from me. You can stay as long as you want. You've been a good help, and I dare say there's going to be a disgusting amount of paperwork in Esherie, she sighed. And you know the language, don't you? Some, said Ilfing. I'm not that great at it. He wasn't being modest. The Harafni are always exactly accurate and honest in their assessment of their skills, and you have some training in how you can't describe it the way people are. I'm just an apprentice, he said quietly. He hadn't unburied his face from his shoulder, but it will give you something to do while you're waiting to see if he improves. And then I could pay you so you'd have a little money when you left. Chant never needed money when we're traveling. Chant might not have, but Ilfing might. It's a useful thing to have. I mentally roll my eyes, look at that woman trying to foist the hallucination off my apprentice. You can't come as a part of my household, and would you like me to invite Evil? He's an excellent scribe, and I might be able to persuade Tashinia Tarmos to let me add him to the payroll. She can find another secretary, and he doesn't seem like he enjoys working with her very much. Ilfing paused. Don't do it. I thought of him hard. Don't do it. I'm going to make a miraculous recovery the second we step over the border. No, he loves Nuri-Even. He wouldn't leave, and this whole family is here, his friends. He didn't say the rest. He knew Evil wouldn't have come away if he'd asked. Evil was not at all the chanting sort. I thought he might be a comfort to you, Constanza said, but I noticed you haven't seen him in a while. Busy, Ilfing said. That's all, just busy. Constanza stroked the boy's hair once more and guided him off her shoulder and into one of the chairs. I stared at the wall and drilled down my affront. The invitation for you and Chant stands. You have your freedom. You can leave whenever you like, but I'd love to have you with me so you would, my spouses and the children. And so would my spouses and children. Ilfing nodded. You can't think about it? Certainly. Her Majesty wants me on my way in a couple days. I can decide by then. There's nothing to pack. She leaned down and kissed the top of his head. Take some time for yourself before then, all right? I just don't want to leave him on his own. No, I cried out mentally. Leave me on my own. Listen to the uppity twit. Helena seems to like him for some inexplicable reason. I could ask her if she'd be willing to sit with him for a few hours. Atlanta wasn't the worst option, but damn it, Elfie, not every moment had to be supervised. I longed to stretch my legs, but I didn't dare to show that much strength and initiative yet. If Ilfing held me to my feet, I would stand, and if he led me, I would shuffle along after him. But show enough impetus to do it myself? Not yet, far too soon. Ilfing accepted Costanza's invitation, and as you already know, I didn't mind. It meant he didn't have to do any of the planning or laying supplies and rations. All he had to do was gather up a bundle of some things we needed for ourselves and show up with me at the carriage. Did more than that, as it turned out. He ended up leaving me alone for a few hours with Helena, who sat quietly with me and read a book out loud. I didn't listen to her. Ilfing came back in the evening, his eyes puffy and red, carrying several paper parcels, woolen hats, mittens, thick socks, second-hand cloaks, and a pair of new fur-lined boots for me. These ones I'm wearing now, in fact. They're the second best pair of shoes I've ever owned. Wonderfully soft. It's like walking on morning fog, the kind that seeps up from the ground right when spring is beginning to stir within the earth. Second best shoes ever. Maybe these won't get nicked off by street urchins like those wonderful turn-toe boots I had in Mapsup. Elfing sniffled as he was unwrapping all the things. Would have asked him about it, but well, I had to act to keep up. He told me anyway, as I knew he would. I went to Evil's apartment, he whispered. I was going to pay him back the rest of the money I borrowed. Elfing swallowed hard and scrubbed the tears off his face. I was going to say goodbye. I didn't think he'd care that I was going, but I wanted to say it for me. He took a huge breath, let out a long slow scream. There was he couldn't get the words out. There was someone else there with him, a gentleman caller. He was just leaving when I got there. It was really early this morning. Another long, shaky breath. I was just across the street when Evil was showing him out, and they were holding hands, and they looked cozy. He bit his lip. Then Evil saw me across the street, and he was, well, you could tell he hadn't thought I'd see that. I went over and he introduced me to the man, but I forgot his name. He left. Evil and I had a fight right there on his doorstep, and I gave him his money, and I left, and that's all. A desperately sad little laugh. That's it. It's all over. Poor little Mike. He's terribly young. Hasn't had his heart broken too often, you know. Hasn't learned how to love someone at arm's length like a chant has to. Regular folk, they wonder if you can really ever love someone like that. There's plenty who do. Monks, nuns, mothers. It's not about keeping them out of your heart. It's knowing that you can't keep them and they can't keep you. You love them like their heart is a bird in your hand. You hold it so gently and you cherish it while you have it. You are filled with the wonder of it. And then they flutter their wings and you open your hands and let them fly away. And you don't begrudge them their flight because you held them for a few warm moments, and how often it is that happens. Anyway, he sobbed for a while, and I drooled, and he fed me dinner, and I let most of it dribble out of my mouth, and he never lost his patience with me. Elfing has a heart as big as the world, you know, and I have walked back and forth all my life from one end of the world to the other, so I know exactly how big it is, better than most anyone else. We were to head southwest overland. The late winter storms were coming up by then, and the harbor was locked in ice. We had a small caravan of carriages with their wheels locked and mounted onto sleds so they could skim over the snow and frozen grounds. We had horses to pull them. A motley set of most mismatched beasts you ever seen. Well, I suppose you have seen them actually, come to think of it. You know horses better than I do. They are not very good, are they? No, I didn't think so. They're built for a purpose, though, which is pulling things over snow and through drifts. Heavy, ugly things, I thought. Nothing like yours. Those horses couldn't dance down an avalanche like yours did. The ride down was so boring that there were several times I almost forgot myself and spoke, and I think I was dribbling enough because Ilfing started talking to me less like I was a complete imbecile. It was just so cold, the drill on my face froze into my beard every time someone opened the door, so I gave up on that ride quick, as you can't imagine. There were 2 carriages for Constanza and her family, and 2 more for the retinue and staff that were naturally required by the ambassador's office, and a 5th carriage, which was exclusively for hauling the paperwork they needed along the way. Damn near Evans can't take a piss without filing a form in triplicate. It was a dead quiet journey, as I just said, for the first 3 days. Utterly nothing happened, and then one afternoon we came upon 3 black witches. The whole caravan came to a halt, and the nervy Evans clustered all the wagons as close as they could and then wandered around between them, muttering or peeking out to look at those 3 still figures standing off in the middle of the field. People came to talk and sounds of everything, of course, and she was the most important person present. We were all frozen in fear and willing to move any closer to the black witches in order to pass them. I got no horse. So yeah. But we stood there in the snow for an hour, then 2. with the Nereans muttering more and more darkly, and Constanza and Helena holding each other ever more tightly. Balasar ran up from the other carriers to check on us. Constanza snarled at him to go back and take more of the guards with him to protect the carriers that held the children. I sat there and tried to look neutral, trying not to shake myself right out of my boots. I couldn't do anything or say anything. I just had to sit there and drool. But Ilfing had never seen the black witches like I had. I think he still thought they were half fairy tale. His curiosity was piqued, so he bundled his scarf around his head and neck and pulled his cloak around him and went out. Wait, Constanza said and looked him up and down. She made him open his cloak and then she paused her lips. Keep it closed, tight, tight, you hear? And then she snatched away his mittens and gave him a pair of her own. Said Ilfing. Yes, I was planning to, the snow and everything. Constanza grabbed his chin in her hands and looked fiercely into his eyes. Do not open your cloak and stay well back from them, well back. Ilfing nodded solemnly and hopped out of the carriage, wading through the thigh-deep snow to the front of the caravan. I tried not to fidget, but he returned soon enough. He climbed back in, shaking off the snow, and settled himself again beside me. He was trembling and pale. Did you see them? Constanza demanded. What? I saw something, Ilfing said. I don't know what a black witch looks like, but they were certainly people, and they were certainly wearing black, I think. He cut himself off, shook his head. Constanza said, brows nodded, and pulled out her pipe. She packed the bowl with a tiny amount of leaf, just enough for a puff or two, and lit it. The guard seemed very concerned, Ilfing said. Good, said Helena, who was riding with us. After a long pause, Ilfing said, why do you take my mittens? Constanza sucked her pipe at him and breathed out a slow, thin stream of smoke. They were green. Ilfing looked down at the ones she'd given him in return. They were made of undyed yarn, naturally charcoal gray. Is that bad if you see a black witch? Only sometimes, says Constanza. They don't like color, or so it said. Dark hues or dull, muddy ones. Those just irritate them, make them itchy like someone who gets sick on shellfish. Bright ones depends on the black witch. A lot depends on the black witch. Some people become black witches when they die, said Helena. They creep around, curse people, steal things, frighten livestock. As time goes on, it's like they lose their minds. Growing up, I had a friend whose father was a farmer, and one day he went into the barn to milk the cow, and there was a black witch just standing there in the middle of the barn with his hands at his side, and he froze because it wasn't looking at him, and of course he didn't want it to, and it didn't move at all, except it opened his mouth and sort of made this soft noise in his throat like a creaking door or a yowling cat. It made the hair stand up on the back of his neck, and he ran back to the house and got a shovel out of the garden shed and came back to kill it, but it was gone by then, and the cow never gave milk again. Started thinking again about what got me into this whole mess. It's been so long, I hardly remember the details. Let's just say there was a sick goat when I saw someone. I saw somewhere and I happened to have some herbs, and there might have been a woman who was a little startled to see me. And come to think of it, I believe I remember I was wearing clothes that were likely pretty grimy and grayish by then. It had been quite a while between towns. There's not much point in paying for a launderer when you can just do it yourself in a river. But all the rivers we'd passed were slow and silty. Helena went on, heedless. I guess the one my friend's father saw must have been one that was quite so bad, or maybe it just wasn't as far gone. They get worse the more magic they use, that's what everyone says, but no one knows for sure. Some of them are like animals. They tear open rabbits and mice with their teeth and eat them raw. And they tear you open too if you anger them or if your clothes are too bright. And some of them look just like real people. They can even talk. Those are the ones that come up in stories. No one ever bothered to tell us any stories about black witches, Ilfing said. Oh no, Helena said uncomfortably. You wouldn't want to talk about them, would you? Like drawing sugar was I thought at Ilfing as hard as I could. They might come for you if you did, Ilfing said. Ilfing asked. They might come for you if you... Helena shrugged and tilted it just a little bit closer to Constanza, who blew out her second stream of smoke and laced her fingers with Helena's. They might, Helena said tightly. Best not to risk it. Ilfing nodded and glanced at the carriage door. You know, he said softly. There already are black witches outside, and we know they're the kind that stand in one place and make that noise, so they're not as bad as they could be, and they're just off in the snow by themselves off to one side of the road, he paused. So we're now being all right time to tell me one of the stories. They don't seem feral. Helena and Constanza shared a look, and Constanza squeezed her hand. Helena took a deep breath. The 16th tale, the Black Witch and the Farmer. You will know the black witch by the drabness of its garb, because it cannot stand to touch color or see, and by its black cat skin boots, because it has no heart and so it lusts to kill soft things, and by its broad-brimmed hat, because it will not abide to the touch of sun or moonlight. Once a black witch came to a farm on a cold, crisp autumn night with no moons. When it knocked, the farmer opened the door And the black witch raised his eyes and said, I am a traveler all alone, and I beg to leave to sleep in your hayloft tonight, and in return I will give you a magic token that you can bury in your field, and all your crops will grow as huge as your wife's belly. As huge as your wife's belly is now. Here Elena paused and bit her lip and looked as if she wanted to unsay it, to twist the metaphor. She rubbed her own huge belly. Constanza's knotted brows tightened still further, and she squeezed Helena's hand. The farmer was frightened out of his wits, and he wondered how the black witch knew about his wife, for her pregnancy had been difficult, and the midwife had prescribed her strict bed rest for several weeks now. She had not stepped foot outside the house, but the farmer thought that the only thing worse than allowing the black witch to stay in the hayloft would be to refuse. The black witch bowed, and the next morning the hayloft had nothing in it but hay, and there was a little wooden disc lying on the front desk with strange markings burned into it. The farmer picked it up and put it with the seeds for spring and poured a little milk into the cup before the icon of Breville in their kitchen, and prayed that no black witch would ever darken their doorstep again. A week later, the black witch came back, and it was pale, and it had grave dirt beneath its fingernails, and its breath rattled in its throat like someone dying of sickness, and it begged leave to sleep in the stable with the horses, and it promised the token that hung with the cows would make them give rivers of milk, and the farmer thought that the only thing worse than allowing this would be to refuse. And in the morning there was a little wooden desk with strange markings on the doorstep. He hung it in his barn as he had been instructed, and the cow's udders did indeed give rivers and rivers of milk. A week later, the black witch came back, and its eyes were glassy and reflected the firelight oddly, and its black clothes looked wet and sticky, and its teeth were yellowed. And it asked to sleep by the fireside in the kitchen. In return, it would give the farmer a token that his wife could wear around her neck, which would protect her in childbirth, and each baby could wear when it was born and protect it from illness and until it could walk. And if the black witch had offered this 2 weeks before, the farmer might have allowed it, but his wife was cheerful and energetic lately, not sickly at all, and she had already born 3 children safely. So the farmer said that the black witch was welcome to sleep with the animals again, no payment needed. And in the morning, the midwife came to visit, and the farmer sighed, and there were rivers of blood running out of the barn door, and blood running out from under the threshold of the house. And when she ran back inside, she found the whole family torn to pieces, and the black witch crouched over the farmer's wife's belly. And Helena popped quite abruptly, as pale as death herself, and I don't think anyone really wanted her to continue. Well, if I hadn't been pretending to be catatonic, I would have caught her up in my arms and kissed her both cheeks. Every last rock in this godforsaken country had go straight to hell. But Helena, though, a garden of blessings for Helena. What a story, what a delight to hear such a story told so well, and a story I never heard before to boot. I'll myself stop now, otherwise I will sit here crowing about the wonder of Helena until the sun falls from the sky and the moon's crack in the half. Don't really know why he's so happy about her telling a weird-ass story like that. The guards eventually gathered enough of their courage to stop wringing their hands, or possibly they'd been wearing themselves ragged, finally ran out of patience for their own terror, and decided that the options were as follows: that they could die standing still when the black witches inevitably turned on them, that they could have a staring contest with the damn things to see who froze to death first, or that they could at least try to slink past them and hope that they didn't take notice. I got just a glimpse of them as we went by. I said before that the Kaskanen don't have magic, and that's true, but because we don't have it, we can feel it when it's about. You know how a cook can grab a hot pan without flinching when anyone else will drop it, howling? It's like that, or like a tanner who stopped smelling the filth a year or 2 into his apprenticeship. Never evens have lived with their land's particular flavor and magic all their lives. Their senses are dull to it, but me, I can feel the heat when I grab the pan, and I can smell the filth, but magic usually doesn't feel that vile. The black witches did, though. They must have been 30 or 40 feet off from the road, but when I saw them, my teeth itched and my fingernails felt sore, and it felt like there were just one single fly crawling around inside of my eyelids. It was like what I danced that night. The black witch and the weavers came to my cell to kidnap me, but so much worse, 10 times worse, vile magic, and no good could possibly come of it. I was glad to be past them. We all were. So I really only got a few pages left. The whole caravan was on edge the rest of that day and the next, and we were just starting to unwind the day after that, when, to everyone's surprise, we were overtaken by that marauding party of your riders, led by Tamay Bataille, your niece, isn't she? Overtaken by the marauding party of your riders, led by Tamay Bataille, your niece, isn't she? I'm not surprised that there were only 3 deaths, to be honest. Fortunately, most of the Nuri Evens fell into the snow and started begging for their lives because a ferocious band of horse demons was just too much to bear after the ordeal of getting past the black witches. Constanza and her spouses all went ashen and tried to hide the children. Helena, though, again, Helena, what a champion she was. She must have taken her own story to heart because she was armed to the teeth. She was full ready to fling herself out a door and start hamstringing any horse or rider in reach, pregnant or no. If I were riding through hostile territory again, she's the first person I want with me. What a jewel, another heart as big as the world, I think. I can cast aspersions on Constanza all day and well into the night, just as I've been doing. But by the stars and moons above us, I simply cannot find fault with her taste in women. Of course, the second I saw that it was who it was, I flung myself out of the carriage and started singing the song of 2 firesides. Just as loud as I could, my voice croaked and creaked with disuse, and I nearly got skewered by a couple javelins before the riders near me heard and came to a blundering halt. It took a second or two for them to get their wits about them and collect their jaws from the ground where they dropped them, and then they cried out in loud voices and sang the descant back to me just like I was long-lost family, and it rang along the caravan and brought tears to my eyes. I'm not too proud to admit. Honored elders, someone bawled at me, tumbling off her horse and catching me up in her arms. I hadn't the foggiest idea who she was, but she kissed my hand, so I patted her beautiful brown cheeks and clucked at her for getting all wind-chapped, which made me her beaming with joy. And then there were others crowding around too, just as I were their own grandfather back from a long journey. I explained what had happened then and exactly who I was, and they explained they were a scouting party and they'd been nearly as startled to see us as we were to see them, and we all agreed that the thing to do would be to rejoin you as quick as we could, me and Ilfing, as many as the Nuri Evens as would like to come. I grabbed Maid Batai's hand when she came riding up. I could tell she didn't recognize me because she called me honored elder instead of old sworn uncle, but I wasn't at all offended. I suppose the last time I saw her, she was about knee-high to a jerboa, and she still had to be strapped onto her horse. But I introduced myself again properly, and I scolded her for the scuffs on her stirrups, which pleased her deeply. We yammered away for a while about this and that and made plans for the journey back to the main camp, and I was so thrilled that it took me a while to get around turning back to the carriage. And then I did, and there was Ilfing, sobbing his eyes out, crying so hard that the tears didn't even have time to freeze on his cheeks. He shot out of the carriage after me and promptly tripped on his own feet. Don't know what he thought his poor invalid master was doing, but as soon as I started singing, well, it was a big emotional best the next few hours. Ilfing couldn't even stand up. He just curled up in the snow where he'd fallen and bawled, and I tried to explain myself to him in between trying to explain to Constanza and the Nuri Evens what had happened and why we didn't have to worry about being slaughtered unless someone did something stupid like leap at one of the Umaka with drawn steel. You know, your people have this funny way about them. I suppose it's obvious to you, but I don't know if you ever realize that what an interesting thing it is. As soon as they know you're a sworn kinsman, it's as if they had never even considered killing you. One minute was this storm of ferocious riders, weapons bloody, horses like war demons. The next moment, the meekest, gentlest ponies you ever saw. And the riders, well, they're still holding bloody weapons, but it's with this natural, careless air as if a bloody spear is as harmless as a bowl of milk. As if they had been caught with it by mistake or they were just holding it for a friend. A complete transformation in seconds. And you know, you people don't ever say, sorry for the mistake, I didn't know you were kin. It's as if the fact that they were about to kill us became untrue the moment they knew who we were. It's as if it never happened at all. It's as if it weren't even something that a person could consider possible. It's a surely delightful thing, and I quite love it. Nuri Evens are nothing like this. You can show them that you're a friend, but they still think you might stick a knife in their back if you get a chance. It took so long to calm this particular flock down that your people all dismounted and started setting up half camp, lighting a bit of fire and brewing tea from melted snow and mare's milk. Ilfing wouldn't be comforted at all. Every time he caught a glimpse of me, he was wrecked again, and we were right back to sobbing. Listen, you can stop, I said to him a good dozen times. I'm fine. See, it was all a story, but it was no good. I gave up on him after a while. I know you people are a little dubious of men together, but I found the cutest boy rider of the lot and bullied him into taking tea and hot milk to Ilfing. Figured that cheer him up, but if nothing else would. I figured it would cheer him up if nothing else would. That boy could fall in love with a rock if it had eyelashes to bat at him. So then I had to explain to Constanza why the Umaka had ridden so far into the heart of the country, told her everything. You're supposed to tell your advocate everything, aren't you? She was furious with me, obviously, especially when I told her that I was going to tell you people to ride straight across the country, pretend to lose 2 battles, and then massacre the Nuri Even army at the ravine on the coastal plain near Biador. The extremely poor tactical position I talked the Nuri Even army into taking, hiding in the bottom of a ravine against an army on a horseback with short bows and Magicians? This is my gift to you. You saved my life, and I hand you a country on a silver platter for you to do with you as you please. Cassandra was upset with me about that. Even after I explained about Evil and his friends, about how it had been their idea as much as it was mine. But of course she would be furious. She wasn't one of the people who had suffered, who had grown up suffering. She lived in a city her whole life. She had an education that she didn't want to walk 20 or 30, 40 miles to get. She had a good job. So do all her spouses. There were things going wrong and she knew about them. She had a chance to do something about it the way things were. She had been in a position where she could have done something about it and she didn't, because there was no glory in that, no glamour, because it was too much like real work. She shouted at me and stomped back and forth through the snow, and I told her that all the prophecies had been a lie, that she wasn't meant to be an ambassador. I just said that so she and her family would be sent out of the city. I owed her a favor, you see, so I made her and her family safe, debt paid. Some of the nearer evens ran off into the night, of course, they not knowing about the plan. All they will say was that we were taken by raiders and that there was a spy in our midst. I mean, if they're going to convict me of it, I might as well commit the crime. And then the rest of it was, well, you already know. Your niece brought us here to you, escorted us from the rest of the journey. Costanza saw sense, so when she cooled down a bit, particularly when I convinced her that you'd be needing an ambassador and a even translator in the next few days. When she saw the size of your army, I think she was convinced then. How could a force like that lose against Tasha and Tarmos and her half-starved mongrels lurking at the bottom of a ravine? She's a horrible twit of a woman, but she's fairly savvy. I credit her that. Knows which way the wind's blowing, knows how to pick her battles. Ilfin cried, and then he was just broken for a few days, following me around like a lost puppy, all big sad eyes like the miracle was about to end and I was about to collapse back into doddering imbecility at any moment. Then there was a day or two where he was angry on me, really angry. Angry like I've never seen him before. I thought he was about to stomp off and leave me for good. I think he's forgiving me now. Just a story I told him, just a tall tale that had spun to save our skins. And if he had swallowed it the same as Tasha and if he had swallowed it the same as Tasha was and the others, then what was there to be angry about? It meant it was a good story, didn't it? That it was truer than truth. It wasn't that I lied to him. It was just that, wow, a chant looks at a story and can see the shape of it entire. It's not the same for us as it is for other folk. We don't get lost in the woods because we have maps. I needed Ilfing lost. He couldn't know that he was part of it while he was listening, while it was happening. He said he felt like he'd been duped. Said he felt like a fool. Said he thought that I trusted him. I do trust him in as much as you can trust any 17-year-old boy. Wouldn't have kept him around as my apprentice if I didn't trust him. It's just that he needed to be lost in the woods with the rest of them to get to that particular forest to work properly. Maybe there was another way out. Only did what I felt I had to. And here we are, so that's that. I don't know what you plan to do next. Nerievid is weak and hungry and ready to fall. Could be yours if you want it. Smash the army at the Atacosa Plain Ravine. Stand at either end, line your archers up along the edges, and just shoot and shoot until they're all dead. Simple, easy. You won't lose more than 5 or 10 on your side if you lose any at all. Take the army's banners and ride southeast as far as you can. You'll come to Vasilla. You'll know it when you see it. It's the biggest thing you'll ever have seen. As big as a winter gathering of the clans, or bigger. There's a city wall you have to get past, but that will be simple. Perhaps one of your wizards has sung to make it even more simple. Otherwise, send word ahead to Evil, and I dare say he and his friends will throw open the gates for you. Or if he can tell you where to find them, go into the city and do whatever you feel like you must. I dare say you know more about conquest than I do. From there you have options. You can go to the bank and fill your saddlebags with gold and silver and copper and ride home as rich as gods. Melt it down, make useful things out of it, little silver bells for your houses and wizards, golden and chimes to hang by the door of your tents. Or you could go south to Ankh and Carmera, to Ekari and beyond. You're past the mountains that protected them. You could be rich in gold or you could be rich in land. Vasilla has a very passable harbor and they get trade. Keep a presence here and you could have the finest horses brought to you from anywhere your coin can reach. From Vinte, from Brahmadan, from Kalabag. I'll leave it up to you. I can see you're having some thoughts. But you must excuse me now. I've been talking for ages and my throat is as dry as a sea of sun. I'm going to go find one of your camp brewers and I'm going to Owa. I don't have anything to trade but stories. I guess I'll go talk someone else's ear off until they give me a drink or 5. Surely I got enough left in me for a fair deal. Oh, and by the way, as soon as my hangover eases enough for me to walk in a straight line tomorrow, I'm grabbing Ilfing and we are getting out of this goddamn country with all speed. May the woman and the horse protect you and grant you cunning, wisdom, knowledge, and all that. Now I'm off to drown myself in milk beer. That's it. We are here at last. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Before we go any further, I'd like to say thank you. A very long time ago in half the world away, there was a little girl who found a story in her fingers. My whole life since I felt that first story in my fingers, you're the one who has been at the center of things. You're never far from my mind. When I was writing this book or others, and I'm pretty much done. There's like 2 parts to this this book by Alexander Roland. So I'm done. It's a little under an hour and a half. It's about to be an hour and 20 minutes to be exact. So I can go to the library and get another book. Let's go. I like this book. I really do. It's well written. You know, it was written or published in 2018. It's a very new book. Probably one of the newest books I've ever really written, ever read. I didn't write this, you know, which goes to show like it's a newer book and newer writing. You know, I read books, older books from the 1950s, books that were written in the 1700s, 1800s, and the writing's obviously different. You know, this is pretty easy to comprehend, and there's some good stories in there. You know, some good stories of perseverance and stuff like that. You know. It's obviously not easy to write a book. It takes a long time to do it, and just the creativity you have to actually know how to structure a book. So much work put in this. I recommend this. There's some things that get close to like it's not really a revolutionary book, but it just, you know, they try to get this guy on that they don't really have a beginning to it, you know. I guess they got to try to get the guy on witchcraft and espionage, that he was a spy, this and that. So it's a cool book. You know, it took me longer to read than usual just because of the circumstances. Trying to record, reading out loud, I feel like it takes at least, you know, 3/4 of, you know, it probably takes like, it's probably like adds a little more time to it when I'm trying to read it out loud as opposed to skimming through it and being able to go through the words fast in my head. But I'm glad that it's done. It took me about a week to read it, maybe a little over a week. Hope you guys enjoy. I recommend this book. You don't have to follow along with me. You could just read it yourself, but it's a good read, you know. It's fantasy. I never really read a fantasy book, but so I'll be going to the library today. Just a book to read, keep your mind sharp, something to do. The internet gets pretty boring sometimes, and instead of just wasting time, you can read a book. You know, I find myself getting a little more sharper in my thinking, especially in conversation with other people. But peace, y'all.